Leslie here, Leslie Plazz. Zazoo Plazz. Got my little friend over there. Happy Valentine's Day. Love Day. Look at this. I got my heart socks on. Oh, it's fun. It's like, what is it? 3:53 in the morning on Sunday, the 15th. So technically it's still my Valentine's Day, but you know, it's the 15th. So I'm going to use the readings from the 15th. If you're new here, this is what I do. I have a theme for every week, and I bring in the scripture readings because I was raised Catholic. So what I do is kind of make a nice big soup or a nice stew. I'm going to have beef stew this week. I got some nice stew meat in the freezer. But yesterday I made chicken fried rice, which is good because this week is Chinese New Year. Wow, what a week we have. Yesterday is Valentine's Day. So I'm going to have the leftover chicken fried rice tonight for dinner, and then I'll make the stew this week. But we've got Chinese New Year, start of the year of the fire horse on Tuesday, which is also that's also a new moon on the 17th, and on the 20th, Saturn and Neptune are going to be conjunct in Aries at 0 degrees, February 20th. This has not happened since November 13th, 1989, and that was the week that the Berlin Wall fell. So I remember because that was the week I turned 24, and it was a big deal. I mean, it was, that was the end of the Cold War. It was a big generational, defining moment for Gen X. So, if you were, those of us, let's see, we were from 24 to, I guess the ones born at the end were like 10. But, I mean, we early ones, we're the ones who really, felt it, remembered it. You knew where you were when that happened. It was, it shook the world. And it was, so that was George, the senior Bush, the first Bush, Big Daddy Bush, George H.W., who made that happen. And it was kind of an optimistic time, It was quite a transformational time to be alive, because we had grown up, our whole lives with the Soviet Union and, the Cold War, the possibility of that hanging over our heads, and we just, we didn't have any, I guess we're used to change. We grew up that change was a constant. Nothing was guaranteed. We were skeptical. If things were good, something was just around the corner. The other shoe was just ready to drop. And so it did. So, you have something really good that would happen, and then, the next week could be something, something would happen. So this is how we grew up. Always, yes, but we didn't have any of the boomers' high expectations. No, those were dashed pretty much as soon as we arrived on the planet. So I offer you my words every week. I combine some of my stories, my impressions, my thoughts, some great pop music, and the scripture readings and astrology. Stir it all up and serve it to you in a soup bowl with a side of crusty bread or some nice crackers. Chianti, whatever. Anyway, where are we this week? Okay, I talked about, Valentine's Day. Did a little posting. I'm going to have my paleo hot chocolate after. And just doing a lot of creative things. You know, I ran earlier. You know, just some nice food and, you know, watching some videos and enjoying. Got my Valentine body lotion on. It's a couple years old, but it still smells good. Bring out the red lipstick. Did some posting. I got a text from several texts from my youngest son. He showed me how he dug up. He has a '96 Miata, little sports car, you know, convertible, that he's been keeping up at the farm. He's got a pickup truck. It's also 30 years old, but I thought he was keeping his car in the garage up there, but I don't know if they can use the garage because it's a rented place and there's a lot of kids. You know. There's 3 guys living there and 1 guy's girlfriend, not my son's girlfriend, but some other guy. So there's 3 guys and a girl living in that house, and they all have these cars all over the place. So he dug out the car from the snow, and he sent me pictures of his cat, Suki, it was a black cat. And she was there first. And then there's this other cat, a friend of theirs, who's dropped off their cat for the winter. I don't know whose cat it is, but his name is Mike the cat. And he's a kitten, you know. And so for past couple of months, he's been training Suki to get ready to live with another cat. You know, he had this like black cat decoy, and he'd bring it up and go, tss, you know, he'd bring the cat up to her, and she'd poke at it, and then he'd go tss, to kind of train her as to what kind of, you know, how to treat another cat, because she's been the only cat. And she's kind of a free spirit. She goes around. She owns the place. She acts like she owns it. Of course, she's been the only cat. Now she's got to get along with this other cat. So it should be interesting. The cat. Oh, I talked about that. Valentine's Day. Okay. Yeah. So looking at the astrology, before we dig into the readings. So this week we got the sun right now. The sun, the moon, Mars, and Pluto are in Aquarius. My moon's in Aquarius, natally. That's what I was born. So, yeah, I'm really feeling this. And then we've got Venus and Mercury that moved into Pisces. What else we got in Pisces? We got the North Node in Pisces. Uranus is in Taurus still. Neptune and Saturn are both in Aries now. So, you know, like I talked about, yeah, we've got that coming up. So that should be, those are some interesting aspects that I'm focused on. Saturn and Neptune conjunction, I think I'm going to talk about and focus on the most, because that hasn't happened in 36 years. 36 years, wow. So, yeah, that's a significant change, because it's at the 0 Aries point, which is the beginning of the whole zodiac. It starts at the beginning of Aries, you know, goes all the way through to the end of Pisces. So it's, you know, straddling that point there. You know, a great reset is what it is. That's what they're calling it, the great reset. So there's the stripping away. Saturn takes away, sets up boundaries, right? Stripping away false hopes and illusions, which is Neptune, to force us to face the reality of our circumstances. You know, basically to sit in our own stuff. You know, and then there's going to be a rebuilding. You know, then you can rebuild lives and institutions on it to better reflect, compassion and a higher spiritual values. So that's what's, you know, that's kind of ties in with the theme of the structures, the scriptures today. Anyway, yeah, the heat just switched on. So we have Siraj. I keep thinking of like that hot sauce, sriracha, or whatever. So this guy, he's the Hellenistic Jew who wrote. So this was, this book was excluded from the Hebrew Old Testament, but it's in the Catholic and the Greek and the Orthodox Old Testament. And it has something to do with the translation, whether it's considered to be, it's something to do with the translation. I don't know. It's a little, picky details. There were things that were accepted and some things that weren't accepted, in the early church. So this was, one of those guys who wrote, but he says, basically what he's saying, okay, so there's an issue of, God seeing, like, what's really in our hearts, right? And you can try to fake things and push things, but you're only lying, you're deceiving yourself. God sees everything, so you can't hide it from God. If you're pretending to be something or trying to hide, something, God sees that, right? And he doesn't force us to act in ways that are, evil or sinful. You can, in other words, what you put your focus on can be yours, right? God sees the big plan, right? Sometimes we don't see the big, we can't see the big plan. We have to, put your faith and trust in God, right? In other words, keep, His commandments. And, He gives us a choice, right? Which way do we want to go? We see the black, we see black and white, fire, water. He set forth these opposites so we can clearly see, But what we have to do is, decide if we want to go for, to let shine forth what is, His plan for each one of us, which is unique, right? We're not supposed to do what anybody else is doing. We have to find out, what are those things that stand in the way of our, what do we need to let go so that we can be most truly, who we're meant to be. So that's for each one of us to decide. God's not going to, we can pray. See, like this, like the Psalm. Okay, Psalm 119. It says, "Blessed are those who follow the law of the Lord." In other words, it says we can ask God to open our eyes, right, to His divine plan for each one of us, on an individual level, right? And that is His law. In other words, people would think, and then to be firm in the ways of keeping your statutes, right? The Spirit, has made known to the people who wrote these words so that we can know, right? That the Spirit, there's a theme of scrutiny this week. The Spirit makes known even the depths of God. It's an issue of getting down to the very, looking at all the details, nitty gritty, right? No broad brush strokes here. Get down to what, get rid of all the fluff and look at the reality of your own situation and what can you do to, really focus on what is, in your way and what you need to do to get where, God is destined for you to go, right? There's this place where We can't even imagine how great it's going to be, but we have to put the work in, right? So that's kind of the theme of the week that I see. So the first letter of the Corinthians, Paul is talking, he's talking to us now. He was talking, to the Corinthians back when this was written, but it's relevant to our lives now. He's really talking about a new kind of influencer on social media, right? You get the kind of influencers who say, look at me, look at how I dress, look at how, my lifestyle. But it's a facade, right? The new kind of influencer will be someone who, is wise in the ways of God in the years to come. We'll be looking for people who have a spiritual connection, who can, share their insights from not a material, who will be respected for their wisdom in spiritual ways, not so much the ways of the world, right? But these are the people who you look at now who have, they don't have the big following. They might not have the fancy, shiny car, the big, into all the shiny things. These aren't people who are trying to be, noticed or followed, right? Those are the people you want to look for. The people who have 18 followers and they have people contacting them in the comments going, oh, great video, but you could be using this video promotion service, and and here's you should be using this video promotion service and you get a lot more views. And then you go and you look at that person and they just joined YouTube 9 days ago. Right? I know your type. I'm onto you. And don't bug me anymore. Don't go in my comments and try to get me to sign up for your damn video promotion service. I know who you are. I don't do that stuff. Anyway, that's just a little side rant. That's my Valentine rant. Okay. I know they bug other people because I've seen other people. I've read it's in Reddit. I read it on Reddit. There have been others. Anyway, where was I? Oh, yeah. So he's saying, some people are seen as the people who get respect in this world, right? On social media or whatever. These are the people, who are seen as successful or worldly, right? Who are people respect that, right? They get the most followers because they, but they say, the most worldly person still represents the least of God's intelligence. In other words, the lowest level of God is still infinitely more wise and more intelligent than the wealthiest person on the earth, the most intelligent person on the earth plane, right? And so it's, if you're seen as if you're wise in the ways of God, but seen as childlike or naive by the people in the world, right? That's God's talking to you. In other words, we're talking about the fool, right? The fool is at 0 degrees of Aries. That's, in the tarot, you see the fool going off with a little, sack on his back. He's got a little dog who's trying to warn him that he's about to walk off the cliff. He's like, da-da-da-da, here I go. Right? So, the dog is grounded. The dog sees that he's going to fall off the cliff, right? So there goes my fridge. So this is kind of like where my idea for Zazoo Plazz came from. That concept, because, you know, the you notice that the dog has a fool's hat on, a little jester's hat, you know, and I'm going off to save the world. You know, I'm on a spiritual quest to, you know, fulfill my divine, you know, my dharma, like what I came here to do. And the dog's like, okay, just keep your feet on the ground, okay? Dumb arse, look where you're going. Just don't wander into, you know, to any dangerous neighborhoods. Okay, that's why we have guardian angels. Some of us need more than others. All right, so it says, here's a quote from that, Paul the Corinthians. We speak a wisdom to those who are mature, not a wisdom of this age, nor of the rulers of this age who are passing away. If the rulers knew of God's hidden plan, they would not have crucified Jesus. See? So there's this hidden plan. We can't even imagine, you know, how wonderful is the life God has prepared for us. You know, the childlike, you know, for those who love him. In other words, those who are faithful to his plan for each one of us. In other words, you don't have to be somebody who's, you know, trying really hard, using your brain, you know, reading this book, that book, trying to, you know, it's not of the mind, it's of the heart, right? It's of the spirit. So Aquarius is more of the mind. It's more of the universe or the space, kind of. But once we get beyond Pisces is, you know, kind of the, you know, the ether, beyond space. It's, you know, eternity, right? And once you get past that, but Saturn puts restrictions on things, right? Sort of, Saturn's like a harsh awakening, you know. It's like a hard landing. It's brutal reality, right? And Neptune is kind of like, you know, rules art, music, creativity, you know, all those things. But, you know, it also rules addictions and, you know, substances that alter our reality, right? And also the things that kind of hide, you know, the veil over the eyes, right? So maybe Saturn is, you know, taking away that veil that, you know, covers our third eye that can really, you know, see things. So it says, blessed are you, Lord, you have revealed to little ones the mysteries of the kingdom. I love that. That's from the book of Matthew 11. You know, the Gospel's from Matthew 5, Matthew, 5th chapter of Matthew. So Jesus is saying, talking to his apostles, he's getting very picky about the commandments, you know, like they say, what was it, going over them with a fine-tooth comb or a magnifying glass, right? He's saying, telling people not to be hypocrites like the scribes and the Pharisees who go, well, you know, I go to church and I sit in the front row and I tithe and I give to the church and I, you know, like Ash Wednesday starts, Lent for Catholics starts this Wednesday. So Tuesday is Mardi Gras, Fat Tuesday. That's the other thing I wanted to mention. Okay, so, you know, there are those in many faiths, but, you know, he's focusing on, you know, the Jews at the time that were, you know, he said, the scribes and the Pharisees, would, they they say, well, at least, we do all this. We're not like those people, right? So they're comparing their holiness to other people and coming out with their noses clean, even though Jesus is saying they're not, still not ready, right, to ascend or to, they're not done yet. They have a lot of work to do, but they don't see that. See, because they're too busy looking over there, like on social media, right? Comparing themselves to people and saying, having themselves come up the moral superior, right? So there are those, and I'm not saying that I'm better than anybody. I'm pretty, I think I don't know. I'm the first to admit that I'm so not perfect. But I flow with things, I think, better than I used to. I think I'm kinder to myself. I don't expect worldly perfection. What I'm holding myself to now is more spiritual, becoming more spiritually aware and seeing myself more clearly, in terms of the things that get in my way, and taking responsibility for those things that I know I need to work on, because I look at my astrology chart and I see where my weaknesses are. You see, God gave us a map. It's called the astrology chart. And when you look at it, you see things that you might not otherwise know. So that's just a little hint. Anyway, yeah. So we all have to clear our own shadows. We have to go into that dark place and look at those things, because we can't take those things with us, right? If you have disagreements with people, if you're in a relationship that doesn't nourish your soul, it's constant friction, right? Even calling somebody, he says raka, which is basically dumb arse, idiot. You stupid. People haters on social media are calling each other names, right? Even calling people, you might think something about somebody, but going out and, having that hatred in your heart towards somebody that you think, and, there's a lot of those people around today. It's very easy to say that person, I'm not naming names, but pick one. That person does not represent my idea of the highest form of, of humanity. But, are you what you're doing is you're eating yourself, letting it eat you up inside. So that's no good either. You have to deal with that, right? You have to find a way to transmute that. Look at yourself. And why do I dislike this person so much? Why do I let it get under my skin, right? So you have to get to the point where you can look at things in the world and you don't get triggered by them anymore, because you've gone to a higher place, right? So you realize whatever that person does, doesn't affect you either way, right? So that's a turning point there. Okay, and then it talks about things like, the commandments. So like adultery, right? Scribes would say, well, I'm faithful to my spouse or whatever. But Jesus says, no, just looking at another person, right? And feeling lust in your heart, coveting that person. Or, someone who's married, I'm no longer married. But, somebody who's, looking at a guy who's married and he's faithful to his wife, but he's looking, maybe he goes online and he sees women out and around, and he's, thinking, oh, she's this or that, or she was not that, I mean, we're all human. But Jesus is just saying that if that's your problem, if you're somebody who goes online and you're looking at all these websites, it's getting in the way, right? You have to find that thing. Tear it out, rip it out, whatever is getting in your way, right? So some people have tendency toward something over, consuming too much of something. Anything can get in your way, right? Okay, so, all right, swearing. He says the innocent steps into the unknown. Right, it's like I said, the fool, the innocent stepping into the unknown, right? Aries. But it's a place that our souls on a very deep level have always known. See? So there will be that feeling, I think, of, wait, I think I've been here before, but not in this life, And then he says, I don't bear false witness. In other words, you don't lie, but you shouldn't swear at all. In other words, maybe you tell the truth under oath, right? But you swear, or you say yes when you really mean no, right? You're not really honest with yourself. He said your yes should mean yes, and your no should mean no. Yes shouldn't mean maybe, if I get see what kind of a deal I can get. It might mean no. I don't know. No, be somebody whose word is final. It can be trusted. Don't be wishy-washy, right? So, so the song of the week. Get to the song, Zazoo. Come on, too much. Okay. Sacrifice by Elton John. I was thinking, what artist is an Aries in the early degrees of Aries? And I said, Elton John. March 25th is his birthday. So that's 4 degrees, about 4 degrees of Aries. So that's pretty close to where Neptune is right now. So October, and also, so I found this song, Sacrifice, came out October 23rd, 1989. It's like, let's see, 17 days before the wall fell. This song came out. And, so it was also a week and a few days before my 24th birthday. So Elton and Bernie Taupin wrote this, and it was from his 22nd album, second single from his 22nd album, Sleeping with the Past. That was a good one, I thought. Got to number 18 on the U.S. Billboard chart, March of 1990. And it was his first number one to hit in both the UK and France, both countries. So, it's a ballad about how hard it is to, stay faithful in a marriage, which is kind of touches upon the readings of the week, or a relationship, but in the video, directed by Alec Kashishian. There was this model, Yasmin somebody, and Chris Isaac, the singer. And apparently they're, in the video, they're married. They have a daughter together, but they're having problems. They're just not. They're like this. They keep trying to. They have this sort of fiery, passionate on and off relationship, and then she ends up taking off, and he's raising the daughter himself, and it kind of speaks to, he's challenging the idea that a successful partnership union between two people requires sacrifice. In other words, you know, sometimes people are just going in different directions, right? And the negativity kind of comes between them, and that's not good. In other words, and it mirrors our relationship with God. In other words, like in the Old Testament, they used to make sacrifices, right? It was hard, but then Jesus came in order that we could have a more, a more natural kind of, real type of love with God that is not so hard. It's more like, it's more of a flow, where, like, at the end, the guy is dancing with his daughter around the room. It should be that kind of love where, our light mirrors our love with God, where things aren't so hard and it's not a struggle, and it's not like pulling teeth, like gritting your teeth. Oh, I gotta be, in this. No, it's not real. It's not natural, right? So, real connection is, it's like, it isn't supposed to be so hard, It should be more effortless, I think is what he's saying. It should be a joy. If you're with somebody, it should be easy. You could kind of, like a soulmate kind of a thing. That's, in other words, God doesn't want us, the ideal is, if there's something that comes between two people in a relationship, it's karmic. It's not natural, right? So that's not real. There's illusion there. In other words, it looks good on paper, but when the rubber hits the road, you can have, they say, love is made, matches are made in heaven, love, but marriages are made on earth. Right? So I think he's challenging that notion, that it's got to be, you've got to give up that part of yourself for somebody else. Now, you shouldn't have to. You should be able to be yourself and pursue your own, spiritual growth, and the other person should be pursuing theirs, and you should be going in the same direction, and it should be more of a flow, right? Because if you're not, then it's forced and it's fake, and your kids are gonna suffer, right? So that's just the way I interpret the song. I don't know. In terms, it kind of fit, with the energies of the week. So anyway, I'll leave it there. You watch the video, and then you can make up your own mind. Maybe you've got different ideas than I have, but that's just kind of where I'm coming from. So, yeah, I'm gonna go have my hot chocolate, paleo hot chocolate with coconut milk, unsweetened cocoa. And then I put a little honey in there and a few marshmallows on the top. That's my treat. So, have a great week, and remember to set, what did I do with it? Oh, I didn't bring it. I have those little, I was going to bring it. I have those little red Chinese New Year envelopes, and when I write out my new moon check, I put it in there with some money for the new Chinese New Year, and it brings me abundance. So, do whatever you have to do to celebrate Fat Tuesday and the Chinese New Year and Hope you have a great week and a great new year. And enjoy before. I don't do the whole Lent thing anymore, but that's a time of sacrifice. So there's another way that it's appropriate. Oh, I went long today. Oh well. Okay. See you next week. Be here, same place, different time. Take care.